There are two important days in your life: the day you're born and the day you figure out why.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural podcast of Before the Badge. Today, I have a guest with me who's very special, dear friend, a brother. Corey Sloan was my first police chief. We're paramedics together. We're very similar in all aspects of life. And I would like you all to welcome Corey. And Corey, if you wouldn't mind just giving us the background, because you can do it a whole lot better than I can. Well educated, a lot of training, a lot of schools, a lot of positions. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us a basis of where you've been, where you come from, what you've done, where you're going, just to establish a baseline of credibility.
Sure, absolutely, Jeremy. Thank you for having me. As Jeremy said, my name is Corey Sloan. I live in Missouri, northern Missouri, and I started my career in a municipal police department here in 1991, July the 17th. Before that, though, I decided that I wanted to serve in public safety, so I started on my 18th birthday. That's been a few days ago, Jeremy. As a firefighter and a first responder, went on and became licensed in EMT, and then went on and got my paramedic. Spent most of my career in law enforcement. As Jeremy mentioned, I've done pretty much all different aspects of public safety: emergency management, the fire service, the law enforcement, emergency medical service, homeland security, and so forth. Currently, I serve as a chief deputy sheriff for the sheriff's office here in northern Missouri, and I did things backwards. So I went and got my operational experience in public safety, and then I went back to school at the urging one of my city managers, who is a very dear friend, and I got my master's degree in criminal justice and sociology, which then kind of became an addiction. Learning did, and I went on back and got a couple more masters. I got my doctorate, and I'm working on my second doctorate right now. So, be 38 years in public safety in August this year, and still going
So you're
strong.
a little bit older than me, just slightly. I was thinking about that.
I'm about 10 years older than you, I think.
Yeah, I'm pushing 50. So it's,
Okay, we'll give it 6.
So I was thinking actually, as I was driving today, going back, just reflecting on what all you and I have both done, where we've been, how we started. And I was thinking, there's a lot of people that get into this business by seeing, Hollywood movies and TV shows and whatnot. So I was reflecting back on, what kind of got us interested in this line of work. Now, for myself, I came from public safety. Grandfather was police chief, several different agencies. And at 5 years old, I remember playing with his handcuffs and getting a tour of his jail and just thinking, yeah, this is something I want to do. And of course, fast forward, I turned 18 and 19, and I start in the fire service as well, just like you did. But I was thinking as a kid, what really kept my fire going was, it was TV. And, you and I, we watched the, back in the day, the original episode of Cops, where they could actually do police work. But then I was even thinking, you and I, again, are old enough. I went all the way back to even the show Rescue 911. Did you ever watch that?
Yes.
So I just thought it was kind of interesting, just kind of what got our fire going. And so I had that, my grandfather as an inspiration. So I always grew up with, looking at my grandpa, I had his gun and his badge on his belt. Of course, he was police chief, so it was all administrative stuff. But I was like, this is something I want to do. I didn't have any other form of direction as to where I was going, or any kind of education other than what I saw on TV. How did you kind of grow up being pointed into public safety, and how did you, train yourself? Because like you said, you kind of went in reverse order. You went to operations and then went to school. So how did you prepare yourself for this job?
Well, thinking back when I was younger, my parents were involved with the county sheriff's office. They called it the CB patrol. Back then there wasn't technically a law enforcement academy or anything like that. So if the county sheriff basically deputized you, you basically were a deputy within the sheriff's office. And they worked large events, severe weather events, whether it be spring or summer or winter events. And I can always remember them having their white vest and saying Sheriff CB Patrol on it. And Dad always had a scanner at home, and him and Mom listened to it all the time. And a lot of their friends were sheriff's deputies, city police officers, and specifically Missouri State Troopers. Two in particular, John Leonardo and Dennis Hahn, who have all passed on now, were really big influences on my life. Matter of fact, when Trooper Leonardo, uh, I was younger, he actually wrote me a letter and gave me 10 things that I needed to do through school to prepare me for a career in law enforcement because ever since I was a young kid, I wanted to be a police officer, but I really can't put one finger on what drew me to law enforcement. It just maybe being around those people, being mentors and people that I looked up to in the community, as well as my parents being involved in certain aspects of law enforcement, if you will, from the civilian side. Because back in the '80s, you could, like I said, you could be on the sheriff's department if the sheriff said so. So that's how it works. So they were unarmed. And I went with them to the events. They had rodeos and different things like that they participated in. So, and television also had an impact on me. I go back to Emergency.
Oh,
The
there's
age
Emergency,
difference,
yes, Johnny and Roy.
with, yeah, with Johnny and Gage, and Chips is in there,
Chips,
right?
yeah,
With Ponch and John, and all those influences. Maybe they did have something to do with it. I really don't know. All I knew at a young age is I wanted to have the opportunity to make a difference. And at that young age, and as I got into law enforcement, you always have that attitude: I can save the world. Nah, you can't. Um, and you kind of have to reflect and change your views as you go through your career.
Yeah, there was a lot of changing. I remember, 7 foot tall and bulletproof, and here I am. I'm going to save the day, and I had to realize pretty quickly is I'm not going to save the world, but I'm going to do my best to positively affect this person right here, right now, and kind of just stay within my little bubble of influence is what I could do. Otherwise, it's mental health just goes crazy, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. As
Sure.
I'd mentioned in the intro, uh, you brought me on with Cameron Police Department. We're both medics with Cameron Ambulance, and that's how we really got to know each other. And then you knew about my interest in law enforcement, and you brought me on the police department as a civilian SWAT medic. Kind of tell me uh, about your thought process there as bringing civilians on board with your SWAT team when you're police chief.
Sure. The main thing was, I wanted to make sure if something happened to one of the officers that was on the tactical team, that I had somebody with the operational skill set, and understanding of what the law enforcement event was, but also to be able to provide that immediate trauma care. If an officer had broken a bone, had taken a bullet, someplace that wasn't protected by a ballistic vest, or any other sorts of injuries that may occur during a SWAT operation, all the way down to a broken ankle to needing a band-aid, for a blister on their foot because of the boots they were wearing or whatever, just something as simple as that. But obviously, as a chief executive officer of a police department, my thing was always looking at if something, the worst case scenario. So if they took around, and there was some type of life-saving measures that could be taken, I wanted somebody on the ground right there. That way they could start that immediate life-saving measure and then extract the officer out to, or officers out to the waiting ground ambulance or air ambulance, and get them the help that they need and potentially save their life. I want to give them every fighting chance they had.
Well, I tell you, it was a great opportunity for me. I love doing it. I love being a part of it. And one thing that actually kind of sticks out in my mind, which is probably controversial depending on who you ask, who you talk to, is that you allowed myself and partner, another medic friend of both of ours, to actually be armed as civilians to be able to defend ourselves if we had to. And that's very rare. And as I grow in my law enforcement career, I kind of think about that. It's like, well, that's something you have to really know that person and trust that person to be able to do that, put them in that kind of position. And forever grateful for that, because we were in the thick of it with everybody else, and it would have sucked not to be able to defend ourselves if that came to be. Thank goodness it didn't. But that was, you were already heads and shoulders above everyone else in your progressive line of thinking with that. Uh,
Yeah, real quick on that, Jeremy. you weren't in there. I didn't want you to act as law enforcement officers. We talked about that whenever we
Right.
started the program.
We're
And
civilians.
we outlined things in policy and protocol, if you will, from the ambulance side. But you can't expect somebody to be with a tactical team and not be able to defend themselves, because state law allows you to do that here in Missouri. You have a right to defend yourself. And if things went really sideways and went really bad, you and your other partner would have the legal right to defend yourself and to be able to get yourself out of that situation. Not necessarily from a offensive position, but more
No,
from a
right.
defensive and getting yourself out of harm's way, if you will. State law allowed that, and that was where the basis of my thought process was.
Well, it was definitely appreciated on myself and my partner's point of view, because generally civilian medics will go in there and the job of the team is to kind of protect them and handle business for them. But we were a small town. Cameron still is a small town, limited resources, and it was great to have a progressive chief that recognized that and gave us the tools to be able to defend ourselves if necessary. I just thought I'd let you know that I appreciated that.
That's my job. As a police chief, the best thing you can do, or even as a sheriff, the best thing that you could do is provide all the tools and the resources to the men and women in your department, for they can properly go out and do the job that you've asked them to do. That is
Exactly.
the sole purpose of being a law enforcement executive.
100% agree. I wish that other agencies I've worked for since had grasped that concept, but that's neither here nor there.
It's hard.
So,
It's hard.
it is. So, progressing on with my experience with Cameron PD, you also gave me an opportunity to make a little money and help you out on the side doing some part-time dispatching as a civilian at first. So we'll start with that. I can tell you, of all the jobs I've ever done, that is by far the most stressful job. Put me in the line of fire, police chases, in a fully involved structure fire, dispatching. My hat's off to those that do that full time. It's a tremendous job, that a lot of weight on the shoulders and a lot of responsibility. And there at Cameron, at the time, there were, we're going back, goodness, 20 something years now. But
Yeah.
there were times that it was just one communications officer in there, and you handled everything from admin phones to 911 to all the radios. And for those that, of course, aren't familiar, as most of my viewers are in Texas now, but city of Cameron is kind of the crossroads of America. It sits, like 40 miles north of Kansas City, 40-ish miles east of St. Joseph, up to 40 miles west of Chillicothe, and then you got the Iowa border to the north. It's pretty much middle of nowhere, so very self-sufficient little community. There was, Corey and I were talking about this just the other day. There was a moment in our time that occurred, winter, I think it was, you're better with dates than I am, but November of 2006, am I correct?
December of 2006, if
Yes.
either one of our memories serve correctly, but I
Yeah.
believe it was December of 2006. We were getting ready to have our police department Christmas party with our families there in the training room of the public safety building.
Yeah, and to help facilitate all the full-time, I came in to man the desk and the phones
Correct.
during that time. And just thinking about, Corey and I, for the both of us, mental health is huge. We're both CIT officers, which we'll get into later and kind of describe that. But mental health is huge, and there's some things that replay in our career, our lives over and over again. And one was this fateful day, December 2006, where I'm sitting there at the desk. I remember there were a couple of the other officers just kind of sitting in there, which was routine, and an admin phone line rings. And I don't know how it is now. I'm quite a few years removed from the communication side of it. But when 911 rang, a light popped up on the screen and had a horrible siren to it. So it really got your attention. And actually, it was a little quick bit of adrenaline rush to get you prepared for what was kind of coming in. Well, we're just sitting there, just chewing the fat, and admin line rings, pick it up, Cameron Police Department, and there's a woman on the other end of the phone that says 2 children have just fallen through the ice. Northwest Missouri, wintertime, freaking cold. Kids are out playing on a pond. And I actually was taken back. I'm like, what? Because normally that would come in on 911, but it was just admin line, so I wasn't even totally prepared for it at all. So she said 2 kids just fell through the ice and then kicked in, and the very little bit of training and experience that I had is what I needed to do. I remember I stood up, kicked the chair out from underneath, and went to business. Now, it's still kind of a blur for me. Some of that is probably suppressed, but what do you remember from that time, and kind of walk through your experience on your side of it? I remember my side was just a lot of phone calls and radio traffic, but from your side as incident commander.
Jeremy, I don't remember how I became aware of it. I don't know if it was something that I walked back in from the training room to the comm center, or if one of the other officers that wasn't on duty that day was in there when the other 2 officers took off to go help the kids that fell through the water. Somehow I was made aware of it. In that situation, very rural area, it was out in the county, DeKalb County, and we obviously went and helped. And on the way up there, I do remember going to the scene, obviously running emergent, and I was talking to our fire chief at the time. And somewhere in the mix, I was under the impression he was going to be the incident commander. And I did not realize until I had got on scene that he had actually said he was going to be the operations section chief and taking care of operations, and he wanted me to be the incident commander. At that time, there was 1 deputy on, so the sheriff's office was sending somebody over to liaison with us and to help us. It was in our fire district. Our ambulance was there, and I got on scene. 2 of our officers that were actually working the street that day, a sergeant and a patrol officer, were already on scene. There was a young boy and a young girl that had fallen through the ice. They were able to get the young boy out of the pond, and we had an air ambulance fairly close by, and we were able to get that boy transferred to a Kansas City Metro Hospital for treatment. The little girl was under the water, and our fire department was doing absolutely everything they could to get him out. But as far as the incident command side, it was a little confusing for me because I missed the radio traffic. I go back now and I listen to it, and it's clear that the fire chief asked me to take over incident command and he was going to do operations. But somewhere along the line, I missed that. And when I got out, he was doing his thing, so I just immediately went into the incident command role and just did everything that I possibly could.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I remember is that we had the capability, thank goodness at the time, where I could patch all the channels together, put everybody together so I didn't have to keep going back and forth and not everybody was talking to each other. And, I had phones ringing. I was talking to St. Joe Highway Patrol, trying to get their water rescue, talking to NTA, trying to get their divers. Davies County came out, all the sheriffs, multiple jurisdictional sheriff's departments. I think it was Davies, DeKalb. I don't know if Bethany's guys ever came down or not. If Harrison County ever made it, they did.
They did.
Pretty much.
They actually did the rescue.
Okay, and yeah, like I said, a lot of it's kind of probably a suppressed memory because I knew the traumatic effect of what was going on. Having worked fire and EMS just at that time, I knew what they would be doing and what they were up against and what they were probably seeing. And just going back to, the communications officer side, that trauma, a lot of times it's overlooked. They are the first responders to that kind of a thing. And from a mental health aspect, it's something I personally have dealt with for, 20 years, that very phone call. And it's just something that I hope that other first responders will take that into account when they go to a critical incident. Don't forget to check up on those that answered the phone call and those that were on the radio. Keep them in the loop for your CISDs and all that kind of stuff, because from just a personal level, it's something that's haunted me for years, and I'm just glad that I was there to be able to help and do what I did and contribute. But it's just one of the things that kind of helped boost my desire to create the product before the badge. Get that mindset of the community effort. Keep your family involved. Know what you're getting into. Know the resources available. Um, Anything else you can add to that before we move on? I mean, it's
You know, the probably the best thing, you know, you ask about the incident commander role, and probably the best thing for me that day was you being on the radio, because you knew what we were dealing with and you knew what resources we were needing. And if I needed to, when I radioed you and I said a specific term, I didn't have to worry about explaining it to someone that had been working the radio very long, because you've been in the trenches with us and you knew that, and that made me feel a sense of ease and calmness, because, you know, in a situation like that, all of our adrenaline's up, right?
oh,
You know,
absolutely.
we're trying to save a kid, you know, and you know, having you in a calm situation working the radio, and I know I worked the radio in '92, and I know what it's like sitting behind the mic. Um, you're running 100,000 miles a minute inside your brain and your body, and your heart's just beating just like you were on the scene,
Yeah.
but you got blinders on, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
But I felt at ease and knew I was more comfortable, I guess, is the word that I want. There's really not a word for it. I was just glad you was there. You were the one behind the mic that day.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure. I'm very glad I was there, but
Well,
I'm glad it could be.
none of us were glad we were there, but
Right.
with the events like they were, you know, the people that we worked with that day it was pretty impressive. I mean, yeah, we lost a life, but it's not from a lack of effort. We did everything that we possibly could.
Absolutely. But fast forwarding just a little bit in my story, January 2007 is when I started the police academy, Missouri Sheriff's Association, sponsored by Cameron Police Department. What made you take a chance on bringing me into the department?
You'd proven yourself. You'd proven yourself as the civilian TAC medic. You'd proven yourself as a communications officer. You'd always expressed an interest in becoming a law enforcement officer. And if there was anything that I could do to help you achieve that goal, you know, by all the sacrifices and the things that you had done for our department and me as an individual, I was going to do that. So I wouldn't consider it taking a chance on you, but just giving you the opportunity to do something that you chose, you consciously made the choice to do, and I just helped you achieve that goal.
Absolutely, and it's, again, very much appreciated, because it launched where I'm at now and what I've been able to accomplish. Now, even though we both parted ways from that agency, we've grown in different ways and done tremendous things, and that was definitely the launching pad for me.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, you know. In hindsight's 2020, right? And it looked back then, you know, I didn't know where your career was going to go. I just knew that you wanted to do something, and if we, as a police department, could be a small part of that to get you to where you wanted to be in life with your you know, your vision, then we absolutely were going to do it. And look at you now. You know, I mean, you've had a great career in law enforcement, still are. So yeah, it's me too.
Yeah.
We're still doing the same thing we were doing years ago. We're just a little older.
Yeah,
Maybe
a little older and a lot
heavier.
grayer. Yeah,
And heavier. Yeah. All the above.
Oh yeah, that's all the stuff that happens. What do you remember from, 20 years ago? How was the culture different? What was it like in law enforcement, especially from an administrative point of view?
So, I was 33 years old when I became the police chief here in Cameron, and I left in 2013, so just shy of my 43rd birthday. So I was there just about 10 years. There's really no contrast between the culture in law enforcement from that time period, 2004 to 2013, to what it is now. I mean, it's a complete flip-flop of everything. Everybody's, you talk about how technology has changed things. And, back then you had a dot matrix printer. You didn't have a records management system per se. You had Word, and you made a form, and you were doing your reports on Word. everything was in hard copy. There wasn't anything digital. The internet was just really starting to break through. You had dial up and that type of thing. And, even probably in the larger areas like where you're at in Texas, they probably didn't have just dial up. But up here in the rural areas, that's all you had. So we didn't have much. You might have had, I think, fastest line was maybe 3 megabit per second, is the fastest you could get at the time. So technology is one of the big things. The other thing is the appreciation from the public. Our community always stood behind us in camera when I was here, and we was very fortunate to have that. And I think the Citizens Police Advisory Board was a big part of that. And then just the community-oriented policing perspective that we had, because if you didn't have a community, it's something that my first city manager, Phil Lammers, told me. He says, Corey, if we didn't have citizens, we wouldn't have any need for any department in the city, police, fire, public works, water, whatever. And the citizens are the most important. And I understood his perspective. My thought was, well, our staff at the police department was the most important because that was my job to fight for them. But yeah, the culture, the camaraderie is still there, but it's not like it was back then. I know at the small department I'm at now, it's there. It was just like I was, back in the early 2000s. I teleported back to the early 2000s because the camaraderie is there. You're close, and but it's a small department, right? We're talking 6 people, so it makes it a lot better. But the camaraderie, exactly. And we've got one on a shift, right? So it's, we'll get to that point. But I think the camaraderie is still there, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the level of sophistication of the types of crimes, the influx of drugs. Back then, I just come off a federal task force, and our big thing was meth was just really starting to make its impact here in the Midwest, and we were dealing with a lot of meth labs, red phosphorus labs, were some of the new ones. Of course, now you can do it in a 2-liter bottle, but we don't deal with those anymore. You're dealing with the stuff coming across the border, and it's much more high grade. Fentanyl obviously is the big one right now. A lot of things have changed. To put it down to one specific thing or a handful of things, you really can't. It's just different. It's not the same law enforcement that I started out in back in the 90s.
No, and even when I started, mid-late 2000s, and you said it before, 2006 to 2013, I'll put August of 2014 as the big change. And
Yes.
being an officer in Missouri at that time, anybody that was around at that time know exactly that I'm talking about Ferguson. And
Yep.
that was the huge pivot point for me and in my little bubble as to how everything changed. From an administration point of view, how would you say hiring process and selecting quality applicants has changed since then?
You're not getting them. I mean, you're either not getting the applications to fulfill the spots, or you can't afford to hire somebody because they can't work for small amounts of money. You got people that want to get into it for the wrong reason. They want it into from a power and ego trip type thing. It happens. You try to weed them out in the early part of the process and find the people that really want to do the job, but it's hard. Every department up here is struggling with the salaries and the benefits, and just being able to find somebody that's willing to do the jobs, do the shift work, and put the time in to do it the right way. We finally became full at the sheriff's office that I'm at in October of last year, but we're looking to maybe put on another deputy. And we spoke with one sheriff and I did here within the last 6 weeks. We told her her salary, what her salary would be, and she was like, I can't work here. She was, I can't afford to work here. And she's right. You can't. We're still paid once a month.
Wow.
So yeah, you just the ability to find the right person for the job has become much more difficult. People don't want to do it because of, I'm just going to say, the media, and
100%.
the light that negative light, negative spin, if you will, it's showed on law enforcement. You never hear about all the good things that cops do, right? All you hear is the negative stuff.
Right.
The stuff's where a cop screwed up or a cop did that. You know what? I don't hear about the doctors and the nurses and the chiropractors and um, the blue collar workers. You don't hear about all those people. You hear about the things that we as cops do wrong. But you don't see what we do every day that makes a difference, and the good things that we do. You only see the negative things, and you start getting fed that over so many years, and it's picked up. You can go back to 14, like you said. You start picking that up, and mainstream media is still pushing that on you. That becomes imprinted. All cops are bad. All politicians are bad. Everybody's bad, right? There's so much negativity in our society right now that it's very frustrating.
And last I checked, I think we still have a better record than clergy. I think we still do better than clergy as far as bad cops.
It's close. And that's a funny thing, because there was a running joke. Sorry to all the pastors that might listen to this. There was a running joke in town whenever I was starting out my career. The kids of pastors and cops were the worst kids you'd ever have to deal with.
The worst.
I mean, that's just, and it wasn't really a joke. When you stop back and you start looking at the statistics, it's actually facts.
Yeah. That, knock on wood, mine were pretty decent. Now one's a cop too, so I don't know.
Well, you couldn't save them all, Jeremy.
Damn, he dumb. Speaking of those, what are you seeing? Now, I see it a lot just because I have so much more volume of people that I have to work with. But what are you seeing up there? How different is the younger generation that are coming in to take our places?
I don't really have a lot of experience with that, because our youngest officers are in their mid-30s. One of them has only been an officer about a year. I think his anniversary was the 23rd of this month, actually. But his father was a police chief and a deputy in the county where I serve. So he's always wanted to be a police officer, and he was hired on in May of last year. And then the deputy we hired in October. He's been in law enforcement about 8 years, got out of it, went to EMS, but wanted to get back into law enforcement, so he got back into it last year with us. And the youngest deputy, I think he's right around 29 or 30. He's got 6, 7, 8 years of experience already, and our other officers got 15 to 17. So I can't really speak to that, because we don't have a lot of young officers, at our organization. I can tell you that our organization is not some place where somebody young from the academy is coming to work, strictly because of the fact of the cost of benefits in our pay. It's just that simple.
Unfortunately, seeing all these new folks come in, I tried to shape and mold my kid as to not be this way. But the sense of entitlement is so big on this younger generation. The laziness, heaven forbid you work past your shift, because I'm supposed to get off at 6. By golly, I'm going to get off at 6. Well, it doesn't work that way in this job. And then just, I'm brand new here. I deserve having the newest patrol car. I need all the best, brightest, flashy equipment. And to any of those that are thinking about doing that, if you come onto the job, it's not the way it works. You kind of have to serve your dues and prove yourself. But make sure you're in it for the right reasons. A lot of us will say, I started up because I want to help people. Good, stay with that. But understand rough times are going to come. And it's not always what you think it's going to be. And it's a career, it's a profession. Do it to the best of your ability. Have some pride in your work. And unfortunately, it's prolific, the amount of those kind of applicants that are getting through the cracks in at least my neck of the woods. So I'm glad that's something you have to deal with up there.
If you get into public safety and you feel like you're just going to work every day, you're in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
when you get up of a morning or an evening, whatever shift you're on, and you feel like, you know what, I'm going to go make a difference today the best I can in my sphere of influence.
Yep, exactly.
It's more of a calling than a job.
It is, because we don't do it for money, that's for sure.
Right, and I'm still doing it. It's not my main career right now. I've moved on in the private sector, own my own business, and teach, but I'm still doing it because I still think I have something to offer, especially younger officers, to be able to guide them, provide them some of the success that I have, but more so the mistakes I've made, to share with them all my mistakes and the things that I've done wrong in law enforcement, whether it's being a beat cop or in administration, let them see the mistakes that I made, allowing them to make their own mistakes, and then being there to help pick them up when those mistakes are made. Not nothing that would be critical, right? That would cause any problems. I'm talking about minor things,
right,
paperwork,
right.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But allowing them to make those mistakes, the ones that I made, that I would suspect that my supervisors at the time were allowing me to make, to help me grow in my profession, and just be able to offer that support. And I know we're going to talk about mental health lately, but that's one of the big things that I am right now as far as a mental health advocate, pushing them to understand that they have to remain grounded. They have to, take care of themselves, mind, body, soul, after every call. And then when you answer that call, because you will, that is traumatic, the big T's, if you will. We got all kinds of little T's, but the big T's, you reach out. You have that critical and stress debriefing and that type of thing, So that's part of that mentoring, that coaching that I like to do with officers right now. And, I guess I'm like a father because I could be a father to some of them. So there's that.
Yep.
So, and the sheriff's awesome. I mean, I love working with the sheriff that I have. But you're right, I would expect if I was still in, and I don't ever want to be a sheriff or a police chief again, I've got that t-shirt. I'd rather be just where I'm at and doing the things that I'm doing right now, because this is where I feel I'm the most effective. It's not that I couldn't be a good leader again in law enforcement. It's just I don't have the initiative or the desire to do it. Politics is so big at times, and I think that's what really burnt me in the position that I was in. And I'm just done with it.
Well, when you're a chief or a sheriff, that's basically all you are, as a politician. And if you're a good one, you're politicking either county commissioners or city council to provide the tools and equipment to your troops. So
correct.
Yeah.
And it gets tiring. It gets very tiring.
I have zero desire to ever do that. Yeah, a lot of people say it's an accomplishment. That's something I want to be. I want to be the big dog. Not me. I'm perfectly happy, being in the shadows and doing what I can do in my circle of influence, and letting way smarter guys like you do that kind of stuff.
Well, I don't know if I'm smarter. I just had an opportunity. I took it, and I don't have any regrets taking it by any means, because the experiences that I gained, and the networking that I've made, and the friends and the lifelong friendships that I've got still from being in that position are still there. So I have no regrets of being there. If I could go back, would I do something different? Absolutely. Who wouldn't, right?
Hindsight again.
I made my fair share of mistakes as a leader, and the thing of it is, you own it, and you take responsibility for it, and you move forward. It's nobody else's fault but yours. And as a chief executive officer, they always say the buck stops with you, and it does.
Yep. Harry Truman.
Yep.
So shifting gears a little bit, you had talked about, CIT and mental health. I would say that's probably is 20-30% of the calls that we answer for service anymore is someone in crisis. And unfortunately, there are a few of those where it's a fellow brother or sister that's in crisis that we have to go help out. What would you say is the best way to kind of, I can't say prevent, because prevention, doing what we do, it's extremely difficult to not do our job. But what's the best way to kind of handle and treat, those long-term big T's, and even the little T's, they add up. There's statistics out there. They'll say normal average citizen will have 2 critical incidents in their lives, and whereas us in public safety are well over 400. So it builds up. It builds up fast. You and I have both been in deep dark holes before, and thank goodness we have our brothers to lean on. Uh, Unfortunately, some don't reach out, and it happens. But I know you feel the same way. We would like to prevent that from happening. We want to be there. We want to be that shoulder to cry on if need be. Uh, just thinking about all those different things that causes that type of stuff to balloon up and explode. Uh, what are some of the red flags that you might see in your fellow brothers and sisters? Like I can say, hypervigilance, survival mindsets being permanent, anxieties, social dysfunction. What are some things that we can look at in our friends and our brothers and sisters and recognize and know that we need to kind of give them a comfort and support that they're needing at that time?
Right. I think at this particular point, Jeremy, it'd be really appropriate for me to let you know that a Missouri State Highway Patrol trooper took his own life a couple of days ago here in Missouri, a corporal. A good man.
I didn't know that.
Everything I've been told. And, I don't know the circumstances of it. It's just I know that it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So I don't have the context of it, but we lost a brother, a couple days ago. We're also coming up on the anniversary of a very good officer that I believe you knew, IB Fugate.
Oh, absolutely.
IB committed suicide. It'll be June 13th because he died 3 days after Andy did in 2020. So we're coming up on that anniversary right now.
Yeah.
So getting back to your question, now that we've recognized the elephant in the room, we have to know each other because we're really good in public safety at masking.
Very.
Put on our face when we go to work because that's who we are. Even though mental health is still big, right now, there's still a stigma with it.
Huge.
People think, if I say that I'm struggling, they're going to take my gun, they're going to take my badge, going to end my career.
Which at some point in time, that was true.
At one point in time. Absolutely it was.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But there's still a stigma here across the United States where officers aren't comfortable going and talking to somebody. So you've got to know the officer as an individual. And the other thing that I would encourage you to do is know their family. Be able to talk to the wife, the husband, the significant other, the children if they're adults or grown, to see what things have changed at home, because those little things right there that change in the family dynamic at home when we're not masking and we're just because you look at this, there's so much bandwidth, right, that we have access to. And if we're 110% committed to whatever we're doing at work, whether it's a high call volume department or a low call volume department, and we're hyper vigilant and we've got all this bandwidth, and then when that shift ends and we come home, you have, especially if you have young kids or other things, your bandwidth is like nothing because you're still processing the things that you went through on that shift. Shootings, stabbings, robberies, car pursuits, different things like that. The stress of supervisors, the stress of command staff, the stress of politicians, the stress of the public. All these stresses are impacting you. Just like asteroids hitting the moon, right? You got things hitting the moon all the time, and you're constantly getting bombarded with it. Mainstream media, stuff on television, stuff on the radio, stuff. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? Just what I shared with you a moment ago about the anniversary of IB, the trooper that self-inflicted gunshot wound in the last 2 days. You're just pop, 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 pop. But when you come home, that mask comes off. And that's where we need to look. Because we're probably not going to see it at work. We might see some things if we look for them, but we have to be really good to see it, because we're really, really good. You and I and everybody else that does this, really good, and we've been doing it a while. We're really good at masking and hiding our feelings, because cops aren't supposed to have emotion, and we're really good at that. So, look for the things, loss of productivity. Let's say you had a guy or gal that was big on tickets, right? And next thing you know, they're not writing the tickets they were doing, or they're sandbagging and not being the first one on the call. They're coming in second or third unit in, exhausted all the time. Their appearance, they're disheveled. Alcohol, substance abuse, even illegal substances, popping pills, pain pills, something to numb the pain. Look at those things. But again, you're not going to see them, right? And I'll just be straight with you. I talked to IB a week before he killed himself. I had no idea. No idea. And he was on his way to a therapy appointment. So you just don't know. So there's not real one telltale sign to look for. But I encourage everybody to let their family know what's going on, and allow other officers to be able to speak with the family, to be able to get information. That's one of the reasons, you go back to the Christmas gathering that we had, right? Back in 2006 when we had the drowning. That's something that I did. Hindsight, I thought it was just a really cool family thing, right? But subconsciously, I think what I was doing is I was bringing the families together so we can have conversations and have gatherings where we could feel how our other officers were actually doing. Can I tell you I did that on purpose? No, I can't tell you I did that on purpose. But we had a lot of those, brought the whole department together.
And the families are the ones that are going to see it first. And if you're, like, when I first started, your wife was in charge of the Cameron Police Wives Association. And
Right.
even though my wife is stubborn and antisocial, she still was there to try and make her feel comfortable and welcome as a police wife. And that's where my opinion is, that's where we're actually going to see these red flags, is when our wives start talking and say, hey, you might want to check on so and so. And
Right.
so I think you hit the nail on the head when it says know the families.
Absolutely.
That was one thing when I started Cameron. We were a family. Unfortunately, when I left Cameron, I really haven't been to an agency that was ever like it, and it's unfortunate all around. So
It's interesting, as we're sitting here having this conversation, I hear sirens going crazy in town right now.
Are you at home?
Multiple sirens. Yeah, I'm at home, so multiple sirens.
Cameron's
here in
Cameron's
Cameron
going
right
crazy.
now, so,
Cameron's burning down.
we got that construction going on I-35 where it's head to head south of town, and
Ooh.
the wrecks that happen down there is just unbelievable. It sounds like a wreck because you've got multiple sirens, so you have police, fire, EMS rolling. So
Yeah.
there goes my ambulance pager for the district that I manage. So there you go.
Maybe Ed'll handle that one. No.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Good. Another mutual, very good friend, brother of ours. So that goofy. I'm trying to go through my notes here. I mean, we've covered so much of it, and I'm very appreciative of your time. And I definitely don't want to keep you all afternoon. I could talk to you forever, of course, being the brothers that we
Sure.
are. Kind of another leadership question I had for you is, what emotional burden comes with being a leader?
A lot, because you're carrying the burden of everybody doing it right the first time for the entire community, and being able to be there quick enough, fast enough to intervene, to save a life, to make a difference in somebody's life. The two things that kept me up at night when I was a police chief was an officer-involved shooting, where we lost an officer or had one seriously injured, or a stranger child abduction. Those two were the things that bothered me the most as a leader. And every time the phone rang at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning,
It's your first thought, I'm sure.
Yeah, who's hurt? How bad? What is it contained? What do we need? Do we need resources? Do we need outside resources? What do we need? Um, and those are the things that those are probably the biggest burdens of them. The other thing is when we screwed up, because cops are going to screw up, believe it or not,
We're still human.
and we make mistakes. Own it. Um, be transparent about it. Take your accountability, and that accountability comes from the top down. So the officer's going to have consequences, and you do that, but you do it fairly. You do it by policy, um, and sometimes that requires termination. Sometimes that termination comes at really, really. It just really has piss poor timing at times. Just to be honest with you, Jared.
Usually, yeah. Usually.
2 weeks before Christmas, you have to fire somebody. You're the asshole, right? The chief's the asshole because you had to fire somebody, but it was for cause. They had a major screw up. My job as a chief is, it's just kind of like as a cop. We don't wake up every day and say, "Oh, who are we going to shoot today?
No.
Who are we going to go kill today?" We don't do that.
Nope.
I don't even know where that came from. Why people think that, but chiefs don't wake up every morning. It's like, okay, which cop am I going to screw with today? Whose life am I going to ruin today by firing them or suspending them or doing some type of progressive discipline? We don't think about that. That's one of the least things we ever want to do. However, we will take that accountability and we will hold them responsible because they swore on an oath and you've given them that opportunity. And when they cross that line, there's consequences. So those were probably the biggest ones for me. But the things that kept me up at night were officer-involved shootings, one seriously injured or killed, and stranger abductions.
Yeah, it's the two of the worst right there.
Yep.
That has, I think, remind me as I've been following along. I think you just completed a CIT course here in the recent past.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get in a CIT course ever since CIT became a thing, and we were very fortunate. So we started the last Tuesday in April, and we went 5 Tuesdays in a row, 8 hours-ish a day. And our last one was this past Tuesday, 26th maybe?
So you're very
26th.
very fresh through the program.
Straight right out of it, yep.
Now, does Missouri require that training? Texas does. We all have to be CITs trained.
No, it's not required. You get some, well, let me back up. I don't believe it's required. Because we requested the training and we got the training. I don't think it's required unless they're putting in the academies now. But I'm so far removed from the academy, Jeremy, I have no idea.
Decades.
Yeah, and not being in the administration since 2013. Yeah, I'm a chief deputy, but in a small department, chief deputy is just a deputy, right? I help with some admin stuff, but as far as the things that deal with academies and different things like that, the sheriff handles, I don't even worry about them because I'm done. I don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
Just let me do my thing, take the reports, handle the calls for service, write grants. Let me do my thing. We're all good. If there's a problem, Sheriff, you got a problem here, you need to talk to this person.
There you go.
But, yeah.
But I think you kind of led into my next question is that you're already doing that. You saw the need, you're taking it, you wanted it, you had the desire. But do you think as a whole, especially in your area, I mean, we have Texas is required through, Sandra Bland Act and things that we have to be trained up on mental health things. But up there, has public safety improved in mental health preparedness, response? It used to be
Compared
always,
to what?
It used to be, okay, so this person's in crisis. We're going to rush through it. We're going to go and handle business, hand off to the ambulance and let them take it from there. Now it's more where I'm at in my realm. We have special mental health peace officers that are going to come out, and we're going to take the time. We're going to speak with, listen, counsel, guide, direct, be there for this person in crisis. And then it's not always throw them in the ambulance, goodbye. It's we're going to see it through. We're going to take them to the provider, and we're going to handle the business and be there with them, because that's the last thing someone needs is start just being passed off. So we're going to be their advocate. We're going to be there for them instead of just going in there, kicking down the door, throwing them in cuffs, and throwing them in a box to get treatment. Have things progressed?
Yes, absolutely. You know, where back in the day you would just have a person that was an emotionally disturbed person or having a behavioral type crisis. You throw them in a squad car and cuffs, and you take them over to some mental facility. You kick them out and drive back home. Right? No, that's not how we do it now. So I'm going to give you an example of what a couple of our deputies handled here within the last 2 weeks. 14-year-old female, um, upset, hiding in a bathroom of a retail store. Been there 30, 60 minutes. Officers get dispatched. They get there. She takes off out of the store and goes back and hides on the back side of the building by the HVAC unit. Um, Male officer got there, asked the typical questions: "What's your name? What's going on?" You know, kept his distance, did all the things he was supposed to do. She wouldn't talk to him. So he called me on the phone and said, "Hey, I don't know what I've got. This is the situation. Can you help?" Sure. So we're very fortunate in the county that I work in that we have a domestic and sexual abuse advocate that works with us hand in hand on domestic violence and sexual abuse cases. So I just called her. I said, "Sherry, I need some help." Did a three-way call, and she was able to talk to the young lady, and she opened up to our officer after that point, and she was able to facilitate the information being shared. But as the officer started doing more questioning, got some more information from her, he realized that she was in a crisis. So he reached out. He reached out to our community behavioral health folks, and it was determined that she needed a crisis intervention team member there to do an assessment. That person arrived, did an assessment. They was able to find the parents, get the parents involved, um, realized that the child needed to go for evaluation. The officer took the child to a mental health facility, did the 96-hour paperwork, was with her the entire time. She was admitted. The officer came back. The crisis team provided feedback, and it was a closed loop. In other words, we were able to get the person in crisis evaluated through partnerships to the mental health facility, inpatient treatment, to the things they needed to do. But it started with the cop, right? It started with the cop that answered that call for service, and knowing who to call, what resources are available, whether it's your community behavioral health liaison, your youth behavioral health liaison, or your response team member in this case. And they were able to provide the services that they needed. So same way with our veterans. You know, we got the VJOs. You know, we can work with our veterans. Huge deal, right? And, you know, anybody that's in a crisis like that, CIT is absolutely 100% important. It works. I'm a believer. And again, if we can make that difference in somebody's life, that positive thing, and drop that stigma, then we're a lot better off. Now, without a doubt, officer safety is always paramount, right? Officer safety first. CIT de-escalation validation is secondary to officer safety.
So there's a decent chance that maybe someone in crisis is going to end up wearing handcuffs. It's just the way it is.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Sheriff and I handled one right after our very first day of CIT. Individuals on the spectrum, was manic, assaulted a school resource officer in that situation. But
that's handcuffs.
he went to cuffs. You're right. But we were able to use our skill set to de-escalate, and cuffs came off just as easily went on. Parents got there, and the child went to get the help that they needed. So
perfect.
It works.
Now, do you guys?
It doesn't work every time.
No, but we try. We do our best.
Absolutely.
Is there any kind of follow-up with the CIT team or your deputies that'll go around and actually make routine visits and do follow-up with these persons that have been in crisis or consumers?
That's a good question, because that was a question that I asked our CIT council leads on the last day of class when we were going through our debrief and our evaluations of the course. You know, I'm familiar with one CIT council that actually writes CIT reports, and they get follow-up. Our particular council does not. Doesn't mean that they won't, because I planted a seed in their mind that I think it would be a good idea. We do our CIT reports. They go to the council. The council does the follow-up and gives feedback to the departments that are using CIT. So that is yet to come to fruition. We don't know that yet. But I think that's a very positive thing that we need, because it helps close the loop. But we try to close the loop on our individuals because we're a small rural area, right?
Right.
So we can follow up on that, and we do that, especially with our victims advocate. She actually works outside our lines. She's like us. She'll draw outside our lines to be able to, help people,
Good.
and she gives us feedback greatly by working with different crime victims and people that are in crisis.
Perfect. It sounds like you guys are on the right path and kind of playing catch up. Rural Missouri, that's just what you can do with the resources you have. But to follow up, we found that follow up and having a direct point of contact for these consumers within our agencies has been a phenomenal asset. So if there's ever a time you can actually work towards that, I definitely highly recommend it. But I know resources are always thin. Now,
Yep.
kind of bringing this all to a close and wrapping it up, I know I have shared with you this project I've been building on the Before the Badge project. And part of this is, part of my vision is to help people with their own personal identities, first responders, being something other than just that badge. For us, you and I, we have all sorts of other outs, weather spotting, storm chasing. We're both drone pilots. We do that professional and privately. We're both master masons. You and I are just cut from the same cloth anyways. I mean, we do so many of the same things. Amateur radio, we're both hammies. So you and I have done everything we could to have our own personal identities with our hobbies and with our own families and just doing stuff outside of the job. Is there anything else you can recommend that I might look into putting into this product that I've created to help others try and establish that sense of identity and work their way on, like where you and I are? We see the light at the end of the tunnel. We know that retirement time is going to come. And unfortunately, when cops retire, they usually die because they don't have anything other than a job. So I think it's so important to have those other things, church and family and hobbies to work your way out. What would be your best advice, for others that are viewing this and for me to include in this project?
I'm going to go back to a Mark Twain quote, another Missouri boy, right?
Yep.
I did Truman, so I'm going to throw Mark Twain out there.
Yep.
There are two important days in your life: the day you're born and the day you figure out why. Those are his words, not necessarily mine, but they resonate. And you need to figure out, A, who you are, what type of cop, paramedic, firefighter, fire investigator, homeland security specialist, whatever it may be, emergency management specialist. You got to know yourself first. So that's a lot of grounding, it's a lot of meditation, it's a lot of reflection, it's a lot of spiritual work and emotional work, and knowing who you are. And then you always have to have plan B. And that plan B is when you hang up the badge and the belt, what are you going to do after that? Because you've got this identity of I'm this guy or gal that puts my uniform on, everything's in the right place. I go to work and work my 8, 10, or 12. I come home, wash, rinse, repeat. I go to court, wash, rinse, repeat. I go to training. I go to mandatory meetings, wash, rinse, repeat. And after a successful 20 or 30 year career, and you give your final 1042, at least that's here in Missouri, your final 10-7 off duty, what are you going to do then? Well, a lot of people are farming. A lot of people go to work for sheriff's offices. A lot of people go to work as elected county officials. A lot of people don't have a plan B. My plan B, I started working on about 10 to 15 years ago, is I'm going to be a university professor. That's where I'm at. That's my plan B. So you've got to have that plan B. And so, well, let's give you an example. So 2008, I tore my ACL at a church function. Could have easily ended my public safety career, right? I was the chief, could have ended my career. We were getting a new city manager, and yeah, he told me my job was in jeopardy. That city manager is a good dear friend of mine right now, and he actually lives in Texas. But you never know when that serious injury is going to happen. So have that plan B. Know what you're going to do afterwards. Have something to fall back on. And I give my dad credit for that, because Dad always told me, always have something else to do. Dad worked for the phone company. They deregulated in the 80s. He lost his job, but he could do all kinds of things. And he told me to make sure that I had other things to fall back on. That's why EMS and law enforcement and the fire service and the education is where I'm at right now, because I give him credit for that. Because if one thing fails, I've got option B, C, D, E, and F, right? So look at yourself beyond what you're going to be as a cop or a firefighter or a paramedic or emergency manager, and figure out what that person's going to look like. And I always do this. I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to have you ask me the same question. If you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self, when you graduated high school, something that would affect you today, what would it be?
Have that foundation with Christ firm and solid.
Exactly.
And what would that be for you, sir?
Knowing that your family is the absolute constant, as well as God, in your life, and there's nobody else. That job where you go and put that uniform on every day, if you leave that job, they're going to have it replaced in 4 weeks or shorter. There's somebody that's going to take your place. There's nobody that can take your place at home as a wife, as a son, a daughter, a husband, a brother, and a sister. There's nobody that can take that place. So just know, you want to put your heart and soul into it. I'm not telling you not to. Absolutely, you commit and you do it 110%. But family is number one. You've got to do that, right? God, family, country. You've got to understand that. And you have to keep yourself from going through that blue flame burnout. And not having the radio on. Shut it off when you get home. Don't listen to the news. Don't, just shut off and have that family time.
Yeah, it's super critical. And just reflecting on that, it's like, I know with you as well, faith is huge. Faith, family, but having those plan B, C, D, and E. For me, started October 4th of last year. Had a run of ETAC and haven't been the same since. I've been on medical leave since the end of January for cardiac issues. And I may potentially be looking at medical retirement. And for me, I've loved what I've done, police, fire, EMS, the whole thing. At a good majority of that point in time, that was my identity. But I've since learned that I need to recircle back to what I would have told my 18-year-old self, is focus on what that constant is, and everything else will kind of fall into place. I've got other things on the side. I've taken up some small hobby farming and beekeeping and all this other stuff that I can do. And, I do security system sales on the side with high-end cameras. So I've got all sorts of stuff that I can fall back on along with my retirement stuff to earn a living. But up here, I'm prepared up here to be able to do that and to move on. So you're absolutely correct. It's have that firm foundation in the Lord, that strong relationship with your spouse and your kids, and everything else I think will just kind of fall into place. Just write your stuff down, make that plan, look into my project of Before the Badge, and it'll...
Absolutely. What you're doing here, Jeremy, with this is something that I wish I had come up with the idea, honestly, because this is it's phenomenal. I've seen the early stages of it that you shared with me, and the product is where it is now, and it's important, and for the price, I would encourage anybody that is thinking about getting into public safety to go through this program, because I wish I had it whenever I started. Yes. Because there's some things that I wish that I had been told that I wasn't told, because there's sacrifices, there's challenges, there's pride when we put their uniform on and we swear an oath. But in the end, this job changes you.
It does. 100%.
My job changed in December 2011, and I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress in 2012. And I've lived with that and I will never get rid of it. It'll always be there for the rest of my life. And
Yes.
the point of that is that you can still be a cop and endure post-traumatic stress. You just have to go through the counseling, the therapy, and do what they tell you to do to get that help. And mine was from one big T and a lot of little T's.
Because they all add up.
Yep,
Absolutely.
they do.
They just build.
And it's okay not to be okay.
Yes. That stigma, that's old school stuff.
Yep.
So I think it's important to have that mindset that it is okay. We can reach out for help. There are resources out there and available. With what you're doing with CIT, you're helping others find those resources. If and when I get back on the job, I'll just be right there back there doing the same thing as well. But in the meantime, we'll just keep on trucking and be the best influence in our sphere of control that we have, and just do good things. And I'm very grateful that you took this time. I know you're very busy, so I want you to know that it means a lot to me for you to do this with me. I've been my number one mentor for more than 2 decades now, so it means a lot to me. And you'll always be my Chief Sloan.
Understood, brother. I know that when we were talking Thursday morning as I was going to Jeff City for some training, and we were just talking back and forth about the project and different things, and it was just like, it just hit me. It's like, you know what? We need to do a podcast. We need to talk. We need to do this and put it out there because, and there's so much more, like you said, we could talk for another hour about the good things and the bad things that we've been through.
Hours,
in our career.
yeah.
But we hit the big points, and by all means, if there's something that comes up down the road, I'm more than happy to come back on and spend some time with you. I think
plan on
really,
it.
really good is me and Ed and you, all three on a podcast.
Well,
boy, can you imagine
that'd be entertaining.
Incidents? Yeah, the incident. A lot of bleeping, I'm sure.
Probably get banned from YouTube.
A lot of it. Yeah, a lot of incidents that we've been on together in some hairy situations together, and that would be a really good one.
It would be good, and I have always been wanting to do podcasts. You're just the kind of first person that said yes, let's do it. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. So it should be a more routine thing, and I look forward to having you as a regular guest.
Absolutely, brother.
As long as schedules can collide, I mean, it's a miracle to get us both kind of in the same place, quiet for a little bit of time, and it's appreciated, and it's
not a problem, man.
Also appreciated anyone who's made it through this long and for watching. But if does your company, your consulting company, have a website?
It does. Viking Emergency. Now you're going to put me on the test. I got to figure out what it was. It is Viking Emergency Prep LLC. See, I don't even visit my own website. So Viking Emergency Prep LLC, VikingEmergencyPrepLLC.com. That's what it is.
Now, if any administrators, anybody's out there that's looking to get a little bit of extra help, visit that site. Let Chief Sloan come and kind of help guide and direct and put an arm around your shoulder and to walk you through it. So, and if
help any way I can.
If anybody feels the need to check out mine, it's 3beestv.com, and it's got a link to the Before the Badge project on that website. So I hope, even if just one person might be on the fence, maybe seeking some help, that they'll reach out. Heck, I'm even available through my email. It's on YouTube and through the website. So I'm more than happy to help out another brother or sister in need.
Absolutely. Me too.
So thank you again, Corey. I appreciate you. And be careful
Absolutely,
out there.
Jeremy. Absolutely, man. Be safe, brother, in everything you do. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you, sir. All right. Everybody else.
See you, brother.
See you, Corey. Thank you.
Bye-bye.